And hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Pumpkin Copter cast, a good old podcast about video games. Today I'm joined by game dev Brian Wilson, who's going to be chatting with us about his latest project.
Hey Tyler, thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here. So we'll start with the regular, who you are and what you do.
All right, so uh, I'd say I am an independent games developer as well as a full-time student. Yep.
Okay. So, when were you first introduced to games?
Hmm. So I'd probably say I was pretty young. I feel like a lot of people had typical childhood. I couldn't say a specific age, but I think specifically like I remember the PlayStation 1 was kind of my first like console, or at least a console in our household. So whatever age and that came out like I think in 94, 99, but we got it a little bit later because I was definitely like old enough to understand and play that. So yeah, so I don't know, maybe like late 90s was my first introduction.
Okay, and what would you say were was your favorite game and or games growing up?
My favorite game then, or
Eh,
favorite games then.
Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, I think with that the PlayStation 1 being so like that was my yeah, like I said, that was like my first real understanding of a console. So I think those 3D platformers like Crash Bandicoot and Spyro, um, Cool Borders was definitely on there. The early Tomb Raiders, I didn't really understand it, but I'd say like yeah, Spyro and Crash were definitely ones that I was able to not maybe get very far because they were pretty hard, or at least just keep playing the first levels on. But um, yeah, Spyro and Crash, and it's cool that those are kind of being remade now. So I get to kind of relive those memories.
Okay, and what made you like get into game design?
Mm, that's a good question. I never really thought about it like growing up. I just didn't really even consider like that was a thing someone could do. And it probably was around high school, mid to late high school, when I like really got back into video games in general and kind of replayed some of the things I missed. And then that was also my first introduction to indie games, with like Indie Game the Movie. So with that was a really big like boost to see that like that was something that people could do. So that gave me like the inspiration to try to do it. But I quickly found out that it's like really hard. So I was a senior in high school, um, and I wasn't able to really accomplish anything. It was too much of it was too intimidating to start. Um, so that was like, and each year I felt like I would come back. Each spring specifically, I would come back with that idea and get a little bit closer to actually like doing something, but never actually making anything. So the next easiest thing to do was just to like write about them and talk about them. And that's kind of when I discovered podcasts, yeah, for the first time, and that people could just like review a game and talk about their thoughts. So I did that for a little bit, but didn't really feel the same kind of satisfaction. So it didn't last very long. And then it didn't really pick up until I saw the like the title of the first degree I have, which is called multimedia programming, simulation, and gaming. And I just saw like an ad for it on my phone, and I was in like the right place at the right time to start that degree. It's an associate's degree in college, and when I saw that, that was just like, it's finally time. And that was like the first real introduction into that world. So, and that was in 2015.
Okay, so if you had a booth at like PAX or something, and someone was walking by, like what would be the rundown you give them about your game, Where the Bees Make Honey?
All right, so Where the Bees Make Honey tells a story about reflecting on different moments from a childhood, which are played and experienced from an adult's perspective. So it's a puzzle game at its core, but there's gameplay mixed throughout in between each puzzle level, and that's also where I tell the story.
Wow. So, like the signature thing that was shown off in the Kickstarter and the YouTube trailer was, a perspective flipping mechanic in which you shift the camera and bits and pieces of the level also changes. So what gave you the idea to put that in the game?
Yeah, so Where the Bees Make Honey is like the first game I've made. So early on, it was just figuring out how to actually have a character run around on screen. But that the rotation mechanic kind of happened when I was learning how to 3D model within that degree that I mentioned earlier. And we were just in Blender, which is open source, and I was making just a small environment, which is actually very representative of the spring level within my game now. And I thought it would be so cool if there was almost, if you're looking at like a cube, almost like in Rubik's Cube, in this like isographic or isometric perspective, that there was something else on like behind it that you couldn't see, that you would have to either like the world would have to rotate or like the camera would have to rotate, that you would see almost like a secret path. And just almost like I knew that it really just started from that. And the fact that it's simple, it kind of like aided like discovery and adventure, and was just enough to like keep me like interested in like I want to do that, like I want to make that happen somehow, because it was relatively a relatively simple idea for when starting. So I got that idea, and like almost an entire year before I was actually able to make it happen. So yeah, that's it.
Okay. And you mentioned a bit before the game is about reflecting on points in one's childhood from an adult's perspective, but like without giving away any of the good bits, could you give a bit more of a detailed summary as to what the game's plot will be?
Yeah, so um, the story is about my main character. At least it starts off, she's an adult and she's at her office desk job, working at a telemarketing company. And it's kind of there where she has this realization that, being an adult's not everything that it's cracked up to be, and kind of is at this breaking point. And that's kind of the right before that you play that transition from her reflecting on that time when she was young and realizing that that was just a better time in her life. So all the moments when you're the young version of the character, you get to play those, and it's almost just like a reflection. And you also get to play the parts when she's an adult, and for so it's just about kind of growing up and then then reflecting on your childhood and then kind of making sense of it at the end, which I can't give away. So
So, for the plot, was as you just summarized it just there, did you decide to craft it from an experience of yours or an experience of someone you know, or did you think that that particular type of story would fit within the context of your game?
yeah, it's a good question. The funny thing about, to be honest, about development is you can only have so much planned out and written and think you have everything in line until like you could only have so much like leadway until you actually like get to that part. Like you can only have so much figured out before you have to actually like make that part, and then once you get to the next part you're kind of just figuring it out as you go. But with the story, it was when it first started it was a lot different, and I guess it kind of shifted and transformed into what it is now by the resources that I have and kind of the people that were able to help me, which I kind of just mean like I have a voice actor for my character Sunny, and I just kind of realized that like for the game to really have like a voice and come to life, that like I have to use these realistic things and these people that can actually make this happen, other than like just kind of dream something and wish it would happen. But it was kind of just using what I actually have and kind of forming the story and the rest of the game around that. So and then in terms of the story, it just kind of made sense, because it is these realistic moments that have happened to me, but also other people, despite their childhood or where they work or their age, that they can be able to relate to, and that was a really important thing because I know that people are going to be able to relate to this, despite where or how they grew up.
Okay, so as someone who knows basically nothing about any aspect of game making, how did you create the game's visual style?
Well, so I'm using Unity 3D as my engine, which I highly recommend. And that was, I just had to get used to that first, and it took a while to feel comfortable and to actually feel like I was expressing, my kind of myself and my vision. But I can say before that, like I've been a photographer and a musician for the past 10 or so years. So it's all of these other elements have are kind of fitting into the game now. So I definitely say it's just years of that and actually having enough practice and skill and taste almost that I can know what I would want to see and what I think looks good, which I think is most important. So when applying those things, like almost all these elements of photography into the game, that's when it made sense, and that's when I was able to actually like feel comfortable with what I was making. But almost just a lot of time and not being afraid to use things other people have made to help my game look better or feel better or just be more fun. So that's my answer.
Okay. So, what platforms do you intend to release the game on once it's all done and ready to go?
So, Where These Make Honey will be released on Xbox One, PlayStation 4, and PC.
Okay. So, and I know you're still working on the game, but do you have an estimated date of release in mind?
Yeah, we're shooting for the end of March 2019.
No.
So pretty soon.
And I guess time for the question that anyone who's ever been on my show and never has any problem with and always understands, and there's never any confusion.
I see it now, and I already don't understand.
So, in your opinion, is video games?
Yes.
All right then.
What is the question?
It's one of those questions. It's a question that doesn't really have a straight answer. The answers I've gotten really depend on whoever it's being asked to. Some interpret it literally, others as like some sort of philosophical question about the merits of video games as an entertainment medium. Others are just confused by it, and yeah, it's
Yeah, yep.
yep.
Definitely on the confused end, but I could go in that philosophical question, but or route.
If you want to,
My
go ahead.
my answer is yes.
Okay.
What's your answer?
Oh goodness me, this is how it feels to be on the other side.
Yeah, let's flip it.
um, for me, I'd say yes, just because I grew up in a very video games house. As I remember, the earliest I can think of is watching my brother play Super Mario RPG on the SNES and just being absolutely confused as to what it was because, I was like 5 at the time and didn't understand the concept of video games. And yep, I've had at least a video game console in my house since I was a youngin', and when I was able to when I started working and was able to buy them on my own, they became an even bigger part of my life. So
Mm-hmm.
I would always say yes to is video games.
Yeah, that's my answer.
All right then. And that brings us to the conclusion of this particular episode of the Pumpkin Copter Cast. I would like to thank Brian Wilson for joining me and entertaining a crazy person with delusions of video game podcastdom.
Thanks for having me. This was fun.
And thank you. And for any of the -7 people listening to this, if you're interested, I do believe the Kickstarter for Where the Bees Make Honey is still currently going on, and there'll be a link to it in the description so you
Oh,
can
perfect.
get more of a direct feel for the game. And yeah, if for whatever reason any of you enjoyed this, feel free to like and subscribe. On the rare occasions I post anything worth listening to, you can follow me on the Twitters at tgorman83. And do you have any social medias you would like to plug?
I do. So yeah, you mentioned it, but we have a Kickstarter for Where the Bees Make Honey right now. We're about halfway through it, a few more days, and we're trying to raise $5,000, and we're just past 3,000. So things are looking good, but definitely check that out. And then you can follow me personally on Twitter at Blankets Wilson, and then the game has a Twitter which is at WTBMH, and then you can stay updated with the game through those.
Okay, so yeah, this has been the Pumpkin Copter Cast, a good old podcast about video games, and I hope to see you next time.